Well, hey, welcome back to the channel. A couple of weeks ago, I did a video on this Marantz SD530 cassette deck. I'll put a link to it above. That way, if you haven't seen that video, you can go back and watch that and then come back to this one. Now, there were some comments in that video that people were a little bit disappointed that I didn't go into more detail as far as what the functions are on this. And I think that's great advice, and I wanted to rectify that. So today, we're going to take a little bit more of a look at what all the functions are, do a little bit of demo on those, and maybe even take a look inside for those who are curious as to what the internal workings are of this one. So stay tuned. All right, well, let's go ahead and get started. You know, the more time I've spent with this deck over the last month or two, the more I really do like it. It's a nice deck. It's well put together. Once you get the hang of where all the controls are, it really isn't that hard to use. As you'll see, one of the VU meters is a little bit messed up, but hey, when I got this, it didn't work at all, so I'm just happy that it's working. Well, let's start off. Go ahead and put in a nice MX60 cassette that I've got some music recorded on from the YouTube audio library, and we'll use that as we go through everything. But let's start off with some of the features that this has on that center control panel. I think that's where most of the questions lie. Everybody knows what eject power does, and then the timer and standby switch. I don't have a timer really to use with that, so I'm not going to go into detail on that. So let's get reset. We'll take a look at the front panel on this. So we'll start with the basics on this one. We'll start on the left-hand side of the front panel. Now, the record on this one is a one-touch record. You don't have to hit record and play or anything like that. As soon as you hit record, it starts recording. We'll go ahead and stop that and rewind it. Now, of course, it is auto stop as well. Once it gets back to the beginning of the tape, it does kick off just like that. Now, record mute will mute the input while you're pressing that down, so you can start your recording exactly where you want it. Of course, it does have an analog counter here as well, which has a memory function where it will stop at 0 if you activate that. Now, index scan is actually pretty neat. What this does, if we hit this button, it'll flash the play button, or the play light. It fast forwards until it finds the first track. It's going to play a few seconds of that track. If you don't hit play, that's going to keep blinking, and it will go ahead and kick into fast forward again until it finds the next track. It'll play a few seconds of that. If you don't hit play, it'll jump forward to the next one, play a few seconds of that one until you actually hit play and play the track. So I thought that was kind of neat. Now, QMS is actually pretty similar to that. What QMS is it will search for the next track on the tape. So if you hit the QMS button, you have to hold that down, and you can either go rewind or fast forward with it, depending on where you are at your tape. But if you hit fast forward, it'll jump to the next track. It senses the silence on the recording, and then it'll play that track all the way through. So it's pretty similar to the index scan, but it does it with just one song. It doesn't keep jumping from one to the next. Now, below that, we do have functionality on this one to record on the three most popular types of tape. Right now we've got a metal tape in there, so I've got it depressed, but it will also record on type 2 tapes, chrome tapes, and also type 1, which they consider to be the normal tapes there. Now, down at the bottom, it is a Dolby noise reduction deck. It does have Dolby B and Dolby C for recording and playback. And those of you that are familiar with the Dolby noise reduction, Dolby B was the first one that came out on cassette decks. So if you have a cassette deck that just says Dolby noise reduction, it's going to be Dolby B. Dolby C came out later. It gave more of a reduction in the high end. I think it was 16 or 19 decibels. I'm not sure off the top of my head. I'm sure somebody will put that down in the comments and tell me exactly what that is. But Dolby C tends to work a little bit better if you like Dolby noise reduction. The only problem is it doesn't sound good if you're playing it on a deck that doesn't have C. And sometimes if you play it on a deck that does have C, there are some differences in how it's encoded where it doesn't quite sound right. The reason why they typically use Dolby B on pre-recorded cassettes is because Dolby B doesn't have quite as much of an effect on the recording, where it actually still sounds acceptable on decks that do not have Dolby noise reduction. In fact, I remember as a kid and a teenager, I would record my tapes encoding them for Dolby B, but then play them back without it because I enjoyed the brighter sound that the tapes had without it. So, little side note there for you on that. Now, looking down the side here, we have the normal functions of any cassette deck. These are all soft touch controls, so no piano keys, that's computer controlled. Rewind, stop, this is play, fast forward, and pause, so your normal stuff there. Now the next thing we'll talk about is the auto reverse on this one. Now in the previous video I showed the head rotating. We'll show a little bit of a video of that again when we talk about these buttons. So the auto reverse on this deck is actually pretty standard and to be what you would expect on a deck of this type. You do have a direction change, which will change the indicators on the cassette door. Now the reverse mode decides how you want your tape to actually work when it gets to the end. So if we put the reverse mode on normal, it's going to get to the end of the tape that's playing and it's going to stop. You'll have to flip the tape over, put it back in, and hit play again. So more of a standard operation that you might be used to. Now if we go to reverse with that symbol, if we start on side A and we play it, when it gets to the end, it'll auto reverse, play all of side B, and then it'll stop. If we go one more with continuous, it's going to play back and forth. It's going to play side A, get to the end, play side B, back, and then back again until you actually hit stop. So continuous music means continuous music. Now right below that are our recording level controls, and they are separate, so you can adjust each channel independently on this one, which is a big deal. I'm surprised how many decks are out there that don't let you adjust each channel individually. There's been a lot of times where I've had to tweak one way or the other, and I think that's a nice feature to have. Now, pretty standard for decks of this vintage, it does have 1/4-inch microphone inputs on it, left and right channel, and a 1/4-inch headphone socket. There's no output level control on it, so the headphone level is whatever is coming off of the tape, which to me it's good for maybe monitoring it real quick, but I really wouldn't want to listen to the music through that because there's no way to adjust the volume. So I think people typically would use the headphone output on their amplifier if they were going to be listening to their music that way. But the mics are good, I guess, for for live recording if you're going to do that with it. Most decks of that vintage do have those front panel inputs. As far as how the reversing looks when the machine is in operation, if I go ahead and hit the play button here, we're playing side A of our recording. Just like normal, the indicator down at the bottom here shows forward. Now we'll let that play for just a little bit so I can get some tape spooled onto it. But if we pretend that we're at the end of the tape and it reverses, I'll hit that reverse mode button to simulate that and make sure we're on reverse. Good. And then direction, and we see that the indicator has moved over to reverse. Tape is playing in the opposite direction. It spun the head around, changed which pinch roller and capstan is working the tape, and it plays it in reverse. So, pretty neat deck. There were some Sonys that I believe did the rotating head style of auto reverse. It seems to work real well. If we hit it back, changes again, goes back. It's real smooth. You can hear the mechanism. It's got a kind of a reassuring clunk to it. I have heard some stories about the azimuth coming out of adjustment on those because that whole entire head rotates. That'll be something I keep an eye on with this deck as time goes on to see if it's a problem that I end up having with it. It makes sense that that would happen when you've got that entire head rotating. I mean, you're talking about very fine adjustments to make sure that those tracks are lined up, and it doesn't take much to throw that off. So I could see where that would be a problem. If we look real close down here, we can see through the window on the tape door that head rotating, and you can hear the motor swapping that around. It's very, very fast. I mean, I will give them that. They did a really good job designing that to work very fast, very quickly. So good job for the Marantz designers in the 1980s. I think they did a really good job there. Let's take a look inside, watch that thing flip around. Now this can be a little tricky to film because I have to hold in the switch to trick this into thinking we have a tape in here. But if I hit the direction button now, if you watch the play head right down here, you can actually see it rotate, and it's pretty fast and it's pretty smooth. It's a decent mechanism they have down there. It's all metal, flips it around pretty quick. Now when it's playing, you notice that both capstans are actually spinning, and they spin in opposite directions. Uses this one for forward, this one for reverse. And when it's in the play mode and you switch the direction, it'll switch which pinch roller is acting on the capstan in order to pull the tape across. So that's how they get that to work on that particular model. So what do you say we take a look inside of it? Now I've got the cover off. This is the front of the unit here. This is the rear. Figured it was easier to shoot in so we could kind of see what's going on. But it is it's a pretty modular mechanism up here in the front. I did have to change the belts on it. The belts were completely perished on it. And it was relatively easy. There's only a couple of screws that hold the mechanism in. It came off really, really easy. Let's get a little bit closer and take a look at exactly what is in that mechanism. All right, well, it's kind of hard to see what's going on in here because it is absolutely packed together and there's wires everywhere. But to give you an idea of how this works, this motor up top is what selects which pinch roller is acting upon the capstan, depending on which way the tape is rolling. Now, this is your main drive motor that's connected via a belt to both of the flywheels. It has two heavy metal flywheels in it that spin each capstan, but they run in opposite directions all the time. And that is for the auto reverse mechanism. The one runs the forward, one runs the reverse. Now, in some dual capstan models, they run at the same direction. It uses both pinch rollers at the same time, gives you a nice, even, tight tape path across there. This one's not like that. They use it strictly for the auto reversing. Now, as far as the main board goes on this, it's pretty straightforward. It's well laid out. Everything's marked very nicely. On this side, this one, you have two Dolby chips. I'm assuming one is for Dolby B, one is for Dolby C. If anybody knows for sure, be sure to mention that in the comments below. I don't want to tell anybody anything wrong. Then we do have an HA12051NT, if anybody knows what that is. On the other side, there's a couple of Marantz chips. Looks like more of a processor style chip, probably for all the computerized functions on the front of it. But well laid out, pretty sparse. I mean, you can see exactly what everything's doing. Nice ribbon cables running through. Most of them do have plugs on them, so you can get those out easily to work on the unit. So it's definitely one that was designed to be worked on. It wasn't a disposable unit back in the day. Now, just for the sake of completeness, I'll run through the back panel again. I had run through this in the previous video, but pretty standard stuff. It does have RCA line input and output connections on the back, just like you'd expect on any cassette deck. Now, this does have Easy Bus and remote control bus connections on the back, which was a Marantz thing that allowed it to communicate between other Marantz components to simplify recording or single remote control playback, that type of thing. So kind of a neat addition on this one for 1983. You know, not something I don't think that you saw very often in, decks in that era. More towards the mid to late 80s, I think, is when I noticed component systems like this that had control of everything via one remote. So I could be wrong, but that's when my memories kind of start with that type of a thing. Down here, looks like that just selects the remote address for this particular piece. Well, that's about all I have for this video on the Marantz SD530 cassette deck. Say it's a 1983 model that I think is pretty full-featured for the time. hopefully this video answered questions and gave you the information that I left out of the previous video. Again, I apologize for not going in depth on that, and I've learned from my mistake, and I will go on. During the time that I had produced that video, we had a loss in the family, and I really wasn't on my A game, so to speak. So it was a little bit of a difficult time, and I should have just not produced a video that week. Otherwise, we would have had all this probably in that video as well. But anyway, hopefully I made up for it this time. If you have any comments about this deck, make sure you leave those in the comments below. I always enjoy reading through those comments and answering as many of them as I possibly can. It's a great group of people that we have here that support the channel, watch the videos, and comment down below, and I value each and every one of you. And I appreciate you guys coming along for the ride. I know there's a lot of videos to watch on YouTube, and I'm just really happy that you have chosen at this point to watch one of mine. So until next time, I've been Chad. You've been watching the Vintage Electronics channel. Happy listening.